Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Revolution 250 podcast. I'm Bob Allison. I chair the Rev 250 Advisory Group. We're a consortium of about 75 organizations in Massachusetts planning commemorations of the beginnings of American independence. And our guest today is David Clay. David Clay, MBE, is the Consul-General for the United Kingdom here in Boston. You've been in the Foreign Service now for about 20 years and have recently arrived in Boston just in time to commemorate Bunker Hill, other big events in the War for American Independence. So David, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And so the consulate in Boston is one of the oldest consulates in the United States.
Yeah, that's right. So the consulate's been here since 1790. I think I'm the 43rd consul here in Boston. There was a short break during the War of 1812,
yes.
But apart from that, we've been here ever since in 1719. We were the first British consulate established in the United States, and yeah, we're very, very proud that George Washington signed off on the establishment of the consulate back in 1790.
It's amazing. So I wonder if you could just tell us, for those who may not know, what the job of a consul is now, what the job of the consul would have been in 1790.
Yeah. So I mean, the role of a consulate has changed a bit over the years, but actually, a lot of what I do would probably have been familiar to Thomas MacDonagh, the first consul here in Boston in 1790. So a big chunk of our work is on trade, so helping British businesses who want to export or establish a presence here in New England, but also encouraging US companies that want to invest in the UK. We also work to support British nationals who get in trouble out here in New England, so that could be getting arrested.
Does that happen?
Hospitalized if there's some sort of big crisis, then we have a role doing that as well. Back in 1790, Thomas MacDonagh would have been very focused on shipping. Most of the consulates back in that period were established in ports. And that work with UK ships coming in and out of the port would have been very important for Thomas MacDonagh. It would also have been how he got a lot of his of the money he needed to run his household and to run the consulate through fees on shipping. But he also had the same responsibility for the welfare of British nationals in Boston and the surrounding region as well. So that would have been an important part of his work, just as it's an important part of my work. And the final area is around sort of political intelligence as well. Okay. So that would have been one of Thomas MacDonagh's roles. He would have been corresponding with the embassy in Washington, which wouldn't have been an embassy back in those days. It would have been a legation, and also corresponding with London about what's going on politically in Boston and New England, and that's very much still part of my role here, to understand what's going on politically in New England, building relationships.
I wonder, what do we know about Thomas MacDonagh?
So he was born in Ireland and worked for the English customs authorities in the UK, and he came out to the US as one of the customs commissioners that were looking at taxation of the American colonies. And it was in that capacity that he came to Boston, where I think the commissioners were headquartered. But then after that, he became the private secretary to John Wentworth, who was the last British governor of New Hampshire,
right?
Until the Revolution, and then he fled north with Governor Wentworth. And then, after the Revolution, he returned to Boston, where he eventually became the first consul and was here for about 15 years until his death.
Interesting. And he was originally from what's now Northern Ireland?
So I can't quite remember where he's from, but I think probably I think it might have been in what's now the Republic
Okay.
of Ireland, but that was obviously 1790 would have been long before the division of Ireland as it is today.
Interesting. And I understand that you have his uniform, or you were trying to recover his uniform.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have it. So the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia has a wonderful portrait of Thomas MacDonagh and also his consular uniform.
Yes.
And in those days, both consuls, ambassadors, diplomats in general, many of them would have worn many of them would have worn uniforms.
So you'll hope to have one made so you can appear in ceremonial occasions wearing the uniform.
There are still uniforms. So if you go to the Vatican, for example, British diplomats accredited to the Vatican will still wear diplomatic uniform on occasions. And Spain and Thailand, I think, are the other countries.
And I know you're not an historian, but there's another famous Thomas MacDonagh in the American relations with the United Kingdom, the hero of the Battle of Plattsburgh, Lake Champlain, who prevented the invasion in 1814. Is there any relation, do you know, between these two Thomas MacDonaghs?
I'm not aware. So my Thomas MacDonagh, the consul, doesn't have a U in his second name in most spellings. So, but I mean, I'm sure the origin of the name was the same, but the spelling is a little bit different. But yeah, no relationship as far as I know.
So I had the opportunity to hear you speak last week at the commemorations of Bunker Hill, and I'm wondering, it's been a long time, and it was very moving to hear you and others talk. And we had the wonderful ceremony of placing the British and American flags on the green in front of the monument. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about Bunker Hill and what this moment of of American independence means to the relationship between the United States and the UK.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really interesting time for me to arrive in the US. So I arrived in Boston in August last year, just before all of the big anniversaries, or many of the big anniversaries in Boston. So Lexington and Concord, and most recently Bunker Hill, of course. And I think it's a really kind of interesting moment to look back and review, where our relationship has come from, how it started, how it's developed over the last 250 years ago, into the uniquely close alliance that it is today. So I've been really struck by the generosity of the organisers for all of these events, including the UK in the commemorations, and thinking about the sacrifices on both sides. And what that meant at the time, and the bravery on both sides.
Right. On Concord, there is the monument at the bridge to a number of soldiers who died there, and it has that line about they came 3,000 miles and died to keep the past upon the throne, which I think is a little bit of a strange way of putting it. I wonder if you have any perspective on that.
Yeah,
Did they come to keep the past on the throne, or was it?
I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, firstly, there's the motivations of the individual soldiers who joined the army and ended up fighting at places like Concord. I mean, they would have joined for a whole variety of different reasons. But there would have, I'm sure, been some sort of animating some sort of animating motive for them around the defence of the United Kingdom and support for the monarch that they would, I'm sure, have had in common. But I think quite apart from the motivations of the individual soldiers, I mean, the UK was obviously at that moment, fighting for the what they saw as the kind of the integrity of the British Empire. Obviously, it's something that we understand differently these days, and I think we understand the motivations of those who were fighting for their freedom against the British Crown as well.
Right. And, Bob Gross, the historian, always points out that the British Constitution had certain format, and these various committees that the Americans were forming actually were extra constitutional. So you can see an argument for those supporting the crown in the American colonies actually are supporting the constitutional tradition as opposed, and perhaps. And we did. There's one of my favorite moments is in the conclusion of the negotiations of the peace treaty, and a French diplomat is chiding one of the British diplomats about, you've just lost these 3 million Americans, and the British diplomat says, yes, they're independent, and every one of them will speak English, recognizing that we're going to continue having this relationship with the Americans.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, one of the things that is at the heart of the relationship is the English language, and that our shared heritage, and even today, that's still such an important part of the relationship, that sort of that person to person relationship, and that intertwining of families and friendships, which has been there ever since the beginning, and is certainly an important part of the relationship now.
Now, do you have any family connection with the United States, or is this your first real experience of being in this country?
No family connections that I'm aware of. I worked in New York between 2016 and 2020 at our mission to the United Nations. So this isn't my first rodeo, as you say, in the United States. So it's been a real pleasure to come back to Boston this time around. And
I'm wondering, because you've been in the Foreign Service now for about 20 years, and you actually got into this because you were, before entering the Foreign Service, you were teaching. And I wonder a little bit about how in the east of Sudan. I wonder how you decided to do the Foreign Service in that particular part of the world.
Great. I've seen the question. So I think the question was how teaching in Sudan, which was what I did after I graduated, then led me into the Foreign Service. So I taught English in a small town in the east of Sudan called Gadaref from, it must have been about 2003 to 4, I think, and it was a wonderful experience, and feel very grateful for the opportunity to have done that. It was a wonderful time in my life. It was a fascinating adventure being in the east of Sudan. I had many wonderful students and colleagues. But my decision to go there, I think, was part of my interest in the region, wanting to understand a little bit more about what life was like in the Middle East and North Africa on the ground, to try and learn a bit more Arabic than I spoke at the time. And I think the thing that's always attracted me to the Foreign Service was firstly the service element and the public service that's a part of the job. But I've always loved to travel, and I always wanted a job that would allow me to see the world. So this job has been a wonderful opportunity to do that. I also, before I went to Sudan, I went to live in Israel for a few months as well, in the south of Israel. So that was another fascinating experience that I think sort of cemented my interest in doing this job professionally.
And it does say something about our two countries, which have had ups and downs in our relationship, 40 years of tension and war, and thinking about paths forward for the Middle East. I mean, I'm not saying we can solve those particular problems, but you must have an interesting perspective on this, having been in a real hotspot of the world, and then thinking now about covering this story from the perspective of a warm relationship between our two countries. No,
I think it does certainly give me a different perspective on this. I think if you look at the relationship between the UK and the US, it wasn't that the revolution finished and then the relationship was brilliant after that. It was quite a long journey. The War of 1812,
Right.
The American Revolution, when the position of the UK was put under a lot of scrutiny, and there was even some suggestion that a war could erupt between the UK and the US during the Civil War. And I was reading the memoirs of our ambassador in Washington during the First World War, and he said that that memory of the British position during the Civil War was actually very kind of live during the discussions about American neutrality in the First World War. So it's been a really long process that has led us to where we are today. But nevertheless, I think it does show that reconciliation can take place over time with sort of will and leaders who are prepared to put the past behind them and put the relationship between two countries on a different track. I think more recently, I think about what's happened in Northern Ireland as a real example of how that reconciliation can work in practice. With my sort of Middle East hat on, I certainly think that leadership dimension is really important. Having leaders who are prepared to take brave and unpopular decisions, I think, has been a feature of how reconciliation in international relations has functioned over the years, both with the UK and the US, but other examples like Northern Ireland. So I think that political leadership aspect is really really important, but also I think a bit of patience as well, and understanding that these things can be generational often, and that changes of perspective and changes in relationships can take generations to play out, and it's not the work of a couple of years. And having a sort of a perception, sort of appreciation of the broader historical sweep, I think, can be very helpful.
Right. We're talking with David Clay, MBE, who is the consul for the United Kingdom in Boston, a consulate established in 1790. And we're talking both about the relationship between the United States and the UK, about his role in commemorating the American War for Independence, as well as general topics. Since did you ask for this posting to Boston?
Yes, I did. No, I was delighted and thrilled to get it. So the Foreign Office has a sort of an internal jobs market. So a list of jobs comes out roughly every quarter overseas, and you apply for the ones that you want to do and that you think you're qualified for, and then there's a process of interviews. And I'm delighted that I came out on top for Boston. I think it's of all the places in the States, I think it's the most wonderful part of the world to represent the UK, and there's such strong historical relationships, such a lot of exciting things going on. So it's been a real pleasure to be here, and I cover the 6 New England states. So it's not just Boston. So I have the opportunity to see a little bit of New England and travel around, which is wonderful.
Well, we're delighted to have you, of course, and it is, and one of the real perks you have is a wonderful house on Beacon Hill as the consul's home or residence.
Yeah. We're delighted to have that, and it's designed by the same architect who designed the State House in Boston.
Yes, Charles Bulfinch. Yes.
Yes, exactly, and also the architect who was partly responsible for rebuilding the White House, the Capitol building after the War of 1812.
That unfortunate incident.
That unfortunate incident. 1814. Exactly. So there's an interesting relation sort of link with the UK and Charles Bulfinch there, as well as in my.
He'd actually studied architecture in London, so he brought back a lot of ideas, and so. Lewisburg Square near your residence. He was thinking about an elegant London square.
Yeah, yeah, and lots of people before I came to Boston, they used to tell me that Boston was felt like the most English of American cities, and I imagine that people like Charles Bulfinch perhaps helped to make that the case. But the way the city's laid out, some of the architecture, it does sort of bring to mind some parts of London. I think you're right.
What part of Britain are you from?
So originally I'm from a town called Colchester. That is about 60 miles northeast of London. Its only real claim to fame, and apologies to the Colchester Tourist Board, but its only real claim to fame is that it was the capital of the UK before London. So when the Romans invaded,
really,
Colchester was sort of the first place that they sort of set up before they then moved on to London. So it still has a wonderful sort of Roman wall around the city. Has a big Norman castle in the middle of it, with some ruins of a Roman temple in the middle. But when you're a kid, you just take this sort of thing for granted. When I was growing up, I used to drink at a pub that was built into the Roman wall called the Hole in the Wall. But as I said, it's just what I grown up with and completely took for granted.
Well, you're doing a good job of selling Colchester to us.
Good. Yeah, everyone should come along.
Yes. Now, one of your earlier postings was in Qatar, actually during the time of the World Cup, and I'm wondering now, Boston may be part of the World Cup next year. I wonder if you have any thoughts or advice for us as we're hosting the World Cup.
Yeah, so I wasn't posted in Qatar, but I was responsible for our relationship with the 6 Gulf states. From London. But as part of that, I was involved in all of the preparations for the Qatar World Cup in 2022, which is a really, really interesting experience. For any World Cup, the British Foreign Ministry has to think very carefully about our responsibility to all of the travelling fans and how we can make their journeys as safe and enjoyable as possible. So we always work very closely with the organising committee and the host country to make sure that the British fans are able to have a safe, enjoyable journey. And we'll be doing that for the World Cup in 2026, which we're really excited about. Obviously, large numbers of British fans present a challenge for host countries. So we often, work very closely with the police in the countries that are going to be hosting the tournament. Just to make sure they're prepared for the challenges of UK fans who are perhaps not used to US policing, which is a little bit different from UK policing in a number of ways. So helping sort of make those contacts, make those connections, work at ensuring everyone has a safe and secure time will be a big focus. But it's also a moment to kind of celebrate the relationship a little bit and sort of showcase what the UK has to offer. I'm really hoping to get a UK team, so England, Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, in for one of the games at least.
Oh, great!
But we don't find out until December. Where all the games are going to be played.
Good luck. And I'm wondering if you have plans for any commemorative activities for the consulate, or the UK is planning any commemorative activities for the 250th of American independence.
Yeah, so in Boston, we're thinking a little bit about that at the moment, and particularly how we will commemorate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence next year. And obviously, our embassy in Washington is in close touch with the US administration about what their plans are and how we can fit in with that. So those discussions are ongoing at the moment, and we certainly hope to find a way to take part in the celebrations of the 250th anniversary, both here in Boston and in Washington as well.
Yeah. I remember at the time of the bicentennial, Her Majesty the Queen visited Boston and other American cities. I'm not asking you, but that was really a high point for Boston, having the visit of the Queen as well as the tall ships in town and other things. So,
Yeah, no, I mean that people still talk a lot to me about the Queen's visit in 1976. I think it left an enormous impression here in Boston.
Yes.
And, people still talk about the speech that she gave from the old State House. I've got a picture of her, driving through Boston with former Governor Dukakis.
Yes.
Back then, with crowds.
Yes.
Sort of covering the pavement. So it was such a powerful demonstration. And reading back on some of the documents about the visit today, people weren't quite sure how Her Majesty was going to be received when she visited, and that there was a little bit of nervousness about how that would be seen and how that would fit into the US's own celebrations of the 200th anniversary of the Revolution. But wherever she went, certainly I'd include Boston in this, there was a really warm reception.
Yes.
For her, and I think when we had the Prince and Princess of Wales visiting here in 2022. Unfortunately, I wasn't here, but again, I know that they had such a warm welcome.
Oh yes,
in Boston, and people really appreciated their visit, and I know they enjoyed themselves tremendously.
That's good.
Bringing the Earthshot Prize to Boston. I think they took in a Celtics game at the Garden as well.
I saw them in the pouring rain on City Hall Plaza, and I had a number of students. I had a class at that time. I said, "Do we have to come to class, or can we go see the Prince and Princess of Wales?" So naturally, how many opportunities do they have to see such an elegant couple, as opposed to how many times they get to hear me talk? So we did, and it was pouring rain, but they all were thoroughly delighted with this opportunity to see them. So,
well, you look very elegant today.
Well. Thanks. So we're talking with David Clay, who is the consul for the United Kingdom in Boston, one of the oldest foreign legations here in the United States, started in 1790, and you've been representing the UK here for almost a year now. And any things that surprised you coming to Boston after the other places you have been?
That's a good question. I mean, as I said, I cover the six New England states, and I think the sort of the variety of things to do and see in New England has been a pleasant surprise. I've got three young children, so I'm looking forward to taking them around New England over the next few years. But I think there's so much to do that I'm not quite sure how I'm going to fit it all in. So that's been one very pleasant surprise. As I mentioned earlier, I think the kind of the warmth and enthusiasm of the Boston and New England welcome to the participation of the UK in the commemorations of the 250th anniversary has been another pleasant surprise. I think before I came, I wasn't quite sure how people here would see that, whether they would, whether they want the UK to be involved. Obviously, this is such a pivotal moment in US history.
Yes.
Fundamentally, it's a US celebration. But yeah, I've been really touched by how warm the welcome has been for our participation in these events.
And of course, there are other foreign consuls involved, the French as well, who are allies of the Americans in the war. And I'm wondering, and I guess it would be a different podcast to talk about the relationship between the British and the French.
But I have a very good relationship with Mustafa, the French Consul-General here in Boston. We've worked together recently to bring together US, French, and UK companies working on climate technologies. So there's some really great cooperation with the French. We also partnered with them on the anniversary of VE Day as well. Wonderful celebration on board the USS Constitution.
Right.
which the Commandant of the Constitution very generously used for commemorating the anniversary of VE Day. So that was another wonderful sort of historic event that we were able to partner with the US and the French in.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so far I haven't done anything kind of with the French around the 250th anniversary of the revolution. It's an interesting thought about whether there's perhaps more that we can do together.
Perhaps, and of course, the French were sending clandestine aid to the Americans even before the treaty in 1778, so we can possibly arrange something. I mean, I'm not sure what, and how sensitive your role is in doing this and commemorating things that at the time were treasonous.
Yeah, I think obviously 250 years ago is a long time ago, and if I'm sure my predecessors 225 years ago would have found it extremely difficult to be commemorating some of these events. But I think with the passage of time, I think the sensitivity and the difficulty of some of these conversations probably decreases a little bit. But at the same time, I think there is an interesting balance to strike. On the one hand, I think it's so long ago that you can sometimes have a little bit of fun around these anniversaries, and I like to joke that I feel a bit sometimes like a professional loser here in Boston. But at the same time, there is a serious side as well. We're talking about people's lives who were lost. So you need to sort of maintain a sort of a sensible balance between those two sides of the anniversary.
Right.
And as I said, I think where we are now, looking back at this 250 years on, I think we can see it more as a shared story of a relationship that has developed into one of the world's very closest alliances, rather than thinking in terms of necessarily of winners and losers in individual moments along that journey.
Very true, very true. And I'm wondering, just speaking then of the connections we have, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about something that is more in your field of interest, that is the technological connections between firms or entrepreneurs in the UK and the United States, and collaborations that are going on that you are helping to foster.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on. I think the challenge for me often is to figure out where I and the consulate can really add value. Obviously, Boston and Massachusetts and New England have the most amazing universities, the most amazing research institutes, many of which have very close links already with universities and researchers in the UK across a whole range of different areas. And the areas that we're focusing on at the moment include things like quantum technologies. I was speaking to a company just a couple of days ago that has a presence, a Boston-based company that has a presence at the National Quantum Computing Centre in the UK, and is really excited about the possibility of closer collaboration with looking at things like AI. A UK AI health company that was linked to Google DeepMind has come out from the UK and established a presence here in Boston just a week ago. So there's kind of countless examples of where that research collaboration is producing results. So it's one of the most exciting things about being here in Boston is helping to facilitate those connections, both at sort of a kind of a research level, but then as technologies develop, thinking a little bit about the business opportunities as well, about how we can build mutually beneficial business partnerships in some of these technologies. But I'm sitting here in Kendall Square in Cambridge, and within a couple of miles of here, there are people working on technologies that are going to tackle the greatest challenges we face in the 21st century. And it's one of the things that I'm most excited about in this role.
Great. So thank you so much. I don't know if there's more we should say, David, or if we should let you get back to your real work.
No, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. It's I feel very fortunate to have this role, to have the opportunity to talk to you and to think a little bit about the longer sweep of history and how that has contributed to the relationship the UK and the US enjoy today.
Great. Well, we're delighted to have you both on the podcast and here in Boston. So thank you so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And I want to thank Jonathan Lane, our producer, as well as our listeners. David, every week we do thank folks who are tuning in. And when we started this podcast 5 years ago, we thought we'd have a handful of our friends in and around Boston tuning in. But we actually have folks all over the world. And I don't know that we have any listeners in Colchester, but every week we thank folks who are tuning in and invite them, if they want to connect with Jonathan, jlane@revolution250.org, and he'll send them some Revolution 250 swag. And every week we thank folks. And this week we have listeners in Hackney and in York, in Yorkshire, in Glasgow, in Aylesbury, in Buckinghamshire, as well as in Gagetown, New Brunswick, and Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. And want to thank you and folks in places between and beyond for joining us. And now we will be piped out on the road to Boston.